Hello and welcome to Where Do We Begin? My name is Rohan Connolly. I'm a journalist, commentator and social media provocateur. And today we're having a chat about my Footyology brand, my experiences in the industry over a fair period of time, and a whole lot of other stuff besides. Hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Rohan. My name's Harper. My co-host is Lockie. How are you, Lockie?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. And I'm super keen to get into our next guest.
Yeah. And first studio interview for about 4 or 5 months, I reckon. So super pumped with this episode with Rohan Connolly. Should we get straight into it?
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, and now a guest we've had on the podcast before, as I said on that last episode, he's a real journalistic idol of mine, but and it's no different this time. So I'd like to welcome onto the show Rohan Connolly. How are you, Rohan?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Harper. They say don't meet your heroes. So, Rohan, I know you'll be nervous, but I'll go easy on you, mate.
Look, it's funny that I was saying, isn't it? I've been very fortunate, actually, that I've got to meet a number of mine, and I'd say 99% of them have been, pretty decent people. So, yeah, hopefully you'll think that of me once I leave.
Yeah. Well, we did have a good chat off air. I think we went on for maybe an hour or so off air in the last episode we had. But anyway,
yeah, I do that. Sorry.
Oh, that's what we love here. And I think we've got the first question. It's always the toughest one. But how's life going for you? How is everything?
Yeah, good. It's been an interesting year for me. So I run my own media brand, if you like, Footyology. I've done that now for 3.5 years since I left the age. And it's been fascinating exercise. I've had to learn a lot of, I'm not very, as a rule, I'm not great about financial stuff and whatever. So I've had to learn a lot in that area. I've learned a lot about different forms of media and producing stuff and designing stuff. And this year's been particularly interesting because I decided to expand the breadth of the Footyology website. So we're no longer just a website that talks about football. We write about politics and society and music, movies, TV. And on that basis, I applied for a grant from a philanthropic organisation called the Judith Neilson Institute, which funds journalism projects. And very fortunately, and huge thanks to them, they showed a bit of faith in me and I got a grant. And
it's awesome to hear.
That enabled me to take on, about half a dozen new writers and some really good ones. So,
if I'm correct, there's a couple overseas, like in America. Yep. Good range there.
Got a couple of American correspondents. Martin Flanagan, who I think a lot of people think is one of the best writers in the country. He's on board. We've got Michelangelo Rucci, who's long been one of the best footy writers in the country. Shelley Ware, leading female media voice and Indigenous voice, Angela Pipos, Francis Leach, Scott Goodings. So it's been really exciting, and it's the workload's increased as a result of that, but I've been really energised by that. We've continued to do the Footyology podcast, and this year we decided to do some live streaming after Thursday and Friday night games, like a Twitter talk.
I think Harper jumped on one of those live streams and made a comment.
Yeah. Well, that's been great fun. Yeah, we call it Footyology Final Siren, and we just, it's like a digital version of talkback radio, I suppose. People just, send through questions and comments, and Finey goes off on his mad tangents as he's prone to do, and we have, we talk serious footy, but we have a bit of fun too. So
which is what it's about.
Yeah, and plus, in addition to that, I've done some freelancing stuff to help pay the bills. So funnily enough, whilst it's been a terrible year for, with the pandemic, and it's been hard being sort of trapped in the house for so long or whatever, it's affected me negatively a lot less than it would some people. And in fact, in some ways I've prospered because of it. So
yeah, I get that 100% because I know for me, like being able to like do stuff like the podcast, being able to, I guess, focus on uni a little bit more. Like there's definitely like, yes, it's been a hard year, but I definitely feel like I've been in the fortunate position like yourself, in which, yes, there's been negatives, but we have been fortunate enough that we haven't suffered as what a lot of people out there listening, I'm sure, have.
Well, I think one of the one of the ramifications of it is that, and it's sort of a good thing, I think, people are sort of working out what really matters to them, and a lot of stuff that clutter in their lives has sort of been swept away. But I think even things like people working from home, a lot more people have discovered that really is possible. And look, I'd been doing that even before I left the age. I'd been doing that almost exclusively for about 5 years, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I'd work so much better at home, less. You miss out on the socialisation and stuff, but you just get more done, and you save time that you'd spend commuting. And so I think, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of social and work practices particularly could really change dramatically, and there might be some real benefits out of that for people.
Yeah, I think people have really kind of found out what they truly enjoy during the pandemic and during, obviously, this long lockdown we've had in Melbourne. But I've got to ask, have you enjoyed the Footyology ride for the whole 3.5 years that you've been doing it?
Yeah, look, most of it. I mean, I guess I don't want people to think, I sort of left the age and I had this grand master plan or something. It really wasn't like that. I was quite happy to stay at the age. What happened was at the time I left, the whole ownership of the company was in serious doubt. They were still looking for a buyer, and there were some grave doubts about whether the pretty generous redundancy packages that were on offer and had been for a while would survive. So I spoke to my accountant about it, and in the end, it was sort of like I couldn't afford not to take a package because I'd been there 30 years. So I got a fair bit of money out of it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep doing what I'd been doing. So Footyology, the website, was just a means of.
Yeah, where did that idea for the website sort of come from?
Well, just there. Just that it gave me a platform to put my writing on, and I was reasonably confident I'd pick up writing gigs elsewhere, but I wanted to sort of be master of my own destiny, and be able to write exactly what I wanted and get other people to do stuff as well. We were already doing the podcast, so it was natural to go off the back of that. And yeah, look, I feel like the Footyology name has a bit of traction now. People, at least in the sporting world, are aware of it. And I think
definitely, I think a lot more people are becoming aware of it now, and it's really starting to build up now, like that brand. And I think people, as well as the fact that like with the scholarship, you're getting really quality writers on as well, of course, yourself. So it's definitely building traction up there.
On the hack, mate. But, no, it's probably a good point here to plug for subscribers. I mean, we still need to fund it, if we're going to keep growing. So one thing we did was link up with Patreon, which is a American writers platform, really, and people become patrons of a writer or a website or whatever, and they support it financially. And it's a bit of a slow burn, that, and I understand that entirely. You don't want to part with your money unnecessarily, but I think gradually more people are getting on board. So if anyone hears this and checks out the website and likes what they see, there's plenty of links there where you can become an official Footyology patron. The one thing I haven't done is put anything behind a paywall, which you can do. And I was sort of going to, and then I thought, you know what, let's see. I want to keep it free. I want people to have access to it all. Let's see if enough will appreciate that and think, well, that's worthy of $5 a month, and get on board that way. And so far, I feel like they have. Things get desperate, I'll probably put stuff behind the paywall, but they're the sort of decisions you've got to weigh up. And
How have you found making those decisions? Because obviously now you're your own boss, you're running your own platform, like you said, you're doing all the financials and stuff. Have you found that aspect tough because it's like it's all on you, or have you sort of like you've enjoyed it, you've enjoyed that responsibility?
No, I hate it.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, I hate doing the financials. I mean, it's just boring.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking to my accountants every 5 minutes, and they're good people. Don't get me wrong if you're listening, guys, but
yeah, I'm studying accounting. I'm a bit hurt by that.
It's just it just bores me. Look, I've got an older sister who ran Film Australia. She was the CEO of Film Australia for a long time, so I rely on her for a bit of business expertise. But small steps at the moment, if it gets hopefully when it gets bigger, these are things I'm going to have to become even better versed in. But it's all learning experience. And actually, even before I left the Age, one of the great changes in journalism is the amount of things you have to be across now, So for probably 80% of my career, I was a print journalist and actually not 80%, probably half, but I started doing radio and then I did some TV, and then with the arrival of the internet, I started doing a lot of more multimedia stuff, video and blogs and this sort of stuff. It's remarkable how many newspaper journalists are still really slow to embrace that. But I think even they recognise now that, you've got to have this diversity of skills, otherwise it's just too narrow a focus to be able to survive in the industry.
Yeah.
And it's an industry that, in some ways it's in a lot of trouble. The business models are breaking down. We're seeing, a proliferation of sort of agenda-driven media. This has been a real hobby horse of mine in the last couple of years, News Corp and Rupert Murdoch's sort of, political desires, seeking to influence politics in several countries, not just here. And it's sort of a shame because I've always had a lot of regard for the Herald Sun until probably the last couple of years. And I just think the way they've handled themselves during the pandemic and before that during the bushfire crisis last summer, I thought on both those things have been quite reprehensible, to be honest, quite irresponsible, allowing people like Andrew Bolt to preach stuff that is contrary to acknowledged science, certainly with things like climate change. But the pandemic, we had this sort of catalogue of their columnists saying, attacking the government for literally anything and saying, the lockdown's stupid and we don't need to wear masks. And, at the beginning, people like Bolt were saying it was all a hoax and, it's no worse than the flu. Well, did you see the figures in the US the last couple of days?
Yeah.
3,000 people died in one day.
Insane.
It's horrible.
And I think yesterday they had more than 200,000 cases reported. Yeah. So they're in absolute crisis. And I think where we're at now, Victoria particularly, is a acknowledgement of we did the right thing. Yes, there were mistakes along the way.
I just feel so lucky the fact that there's been 0 cases for how many days?
35.
35. Back in October, then, it's amazing. I don't think you can really criticise what the Victorian government's done because we're just so lucky that we get to enjoy Christmas with our friends, our family, and we get to come to, Rohan gets to come to our house and jump in the studio and go do our podcast.
Yeah, and I just want to say personally, I reckon I've latched onto your work more since you started your own independent thing with Footyology in the last 3.5 years or whatever you said. I listened to the podcast, read some of your articles, but obviously you were talking about the Murdoch kind of conglomerate. I don't know if that's the right word, but I reckon independent kind of media is one of the key parts to have like a kind of thriving democracy, But do you reckon your view on independent media organisations has developed more since you've started your own, or did you already have a view that they were like really crucial?
I think we've seen what were the major media players. Their influence has been reduced and their power has been reduced, which in a way I think is a good thing. We were already starting to see the growth of things like The Guardian in Australia, the New Daily, which does particularly well, that only started 5 or 6 years ago. Things like, I've always been a big fan of Crikey, which is a news and politics source. And then people like me, there's a whole lot of journos like me who have started up their own sort of brands. And so the media, it's becoming a lot more niche driven. There's a lot of little niches, and in a way it makes it more of a task to find the right niches, to find what interests you and to find, reputable, reliable sources of information. But I think once you do that, it's far more rewarding. So this is the thing, like a broad newspaper like the Herald Sun or the Age, they're trying to please everyone. And in a way, by doing that, it means that their coverage of everything becomes a bit superficial, even in terms of volume.
Please everyone.
Yeah, well, and that you don't have the space to devote to it all. Whereas, it's funny because I've sort of done the same thing. But, like there are politics, for example. I'm into politics. Well, I tend to go to Crikey. I tend to go to, and there's a couple of political blogs that people write that I go to, and they're informed, they're specialists on that field, so they really know their stuff. And I think in a way so in some ways I'm worried about where the media's at because the business models are breaking down and the advertising revenue's not there. And funding it is always going to be an issue. But in terms of the scope, the vast array of information we now have, thanks to the internet mainly, there's more information out there than there's ever been before. The downside of that is that you get phenomenon like fake news, do
you think social media's had a major impact on that and the change in the media and the fact that it's not like back in the day where you get your news either from the news at 6 o'clock at night or the newspaper the next day? Now it's instantaneous. Something happens, you log on your phone, you log on to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it's just there. Do you sort of think that's how reporting's changed, as well as the fact that now, because it can be reported so quickly, it's not about the story, it's about who can report it first?
Well, there's a few elements there. I mean, yes, the immediacy of news has never been greater, and I think Twitter is the best platform for that. I think it's been great in the way that people use Twitter as a news dissemination platform. So a lot of people I follow, they'll tweet links to all these stories, and if I didn't have access to Twitter, I wouldn't know this stuff existed, So someone tweets a story and says, this is a great piece on blah, 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 so I'll read it, and that furthers my knowledge of something, So I think that part of it's fantastic. The last thing you mentioned there, that sort of race to be first, you know what, funnily enough, I think maybe it's just who you follow, whatever, but I find that is probably more of an issue in football reporting than it is in politics or general news or maybe with, sort of big global news stories, when, say, there's a terrorist running loose on the streets or whatever, information can be very sketchy.
That's pretty useful, yeah.
But that whole thing about being first, not being accurate, I seem to hear about that more with football reporting than anything else. I hope that's not a comment on the quality of the footy journalists, but I've never been, I've written plenty of news stories, but from reasonably early on, I gravitated more towards that writing opinion and comment and analysis and interviews, features, long reads and stuff. And that's always been more satisfying to me than breaking a big news story. Having said that, the times I have broken big news stories, it is exciting. There's no doubt about that. And a couple of the biggest I've had in my career were news stories. This is going back to the year of mergers in 1996.
Yeah, it's actually, I read an interesting article today about how you found out about the potential merge between Melbourne and Hawthorn. Do you want to talk about that?
Where'd you read that? I'm trying to remember where
So it was Sydney Morning Herald. Oh, I think, it must have been The Age originally, and they're owned by the same people. So we were having a look at that. That was pretty interesting.
So what happened with that? So in 96 you had like Fitzroy was in all sorts of trouble and the AFL wanted them to go to Brisbane. And Fitzroy were sort of desperately trying to avoid that. But when I say we, I mean the Sunday Age, which back then had its own staff, and I was on the Sunday Age. We broke the information about that North Melbourne Fitzroy attempted merger, basically because a disaffected North Melbourne director who didn't want it to happen picked up the phone and rang us. And then I put it on the Fitzroy president, Dyson Hall-Lacey, who decided. Basically, we had a conversation. I said, look, we're going to write this. And he went, well, okay, if it's going to come out, let's do it properly so you don't get anything wrong. So meet me in my office in an hour and I'll give you the whole thing. Went down to his office. He was a lawyer, leading lawyer, and, gave me all the documents, gave me I love this bit, the proposed logo of the new club had been drawn literally on a napkin. We ran that on the front cover, blah, blah, blah. So that was that one. And then a month later, Hawthorn and Melbourne had both, their names had come up in a potential merger situation. But then a good mate of mine who had zero interest in footy, I bumped into him one day in the street and he said, I meant to tell you, I think I might have a story for you. And I was sort of saying, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I went to this party on the weekend and I ran into the AFL. I'm not going to say this guy's name. People will be able to work it out. He goes, I ran into the AFL lawyer. Geez, he was pissed. And I thought, oh, yeah, well, he did have that reputation. I said, oh, yeah, well, what happened there? He said, well, he was telling me about – he said, I remember thinking, well, that this might interest Rohan. He told me that we were about to see a merger announced. And I said, oh, yeah. Well, he said, yeah, I think it was, he said, Melbourne and Hawthorn. And,
did you ask if he heard it wrong?
And he said, well, he tells me they've signed a heads of agreement. And it was like, he said, is that of any interest to you? And I said, oh, yeah, I can probably do something with that.
Yeah.
So, like the Sunday Age, we obviously only came out one day a week, but we did well enough to break both those stories. So, that was a bit of a buzz. But, I mean, they're massive in the context of footy. They're massive stories, and it's harder and harder to get. There aren't that many of those stories. They're harder to get now because clubs have much bigger media departments and they break a lot of their own news on their own media outlets, their own websites and video and stuff. And I find a lot of the stuff that some of these young TV reporter types, hello Tom Brown, get
don't mention
really excited about is often not a great deal. So therefore you get a story like the two Richmond guys, out on the piss on the Gold Coast, and then, I jump on Twitter and there's Tom tweeting breathlessly about it. And then
you like Tom on Twitter? Can you make sense of his Twitter?
Well, not this one. When he comes back and he goes, apparently the fight knocked the kebab was ruined. And Sydney Stack went back and bought a second one. It's like
top-notch journalism, the important stuff being reported there.
But quick, more on the kebab update.
Was it mixed?
Or did it have tzatziki sauce on it? So I can sort of do without that stuff. But one of the things that annoys me about footy media now is I don't think there's as many people in it who have a genuine passion for and love of the game. I can, I'm going to.
Does that make you feel being somebody that's reported for so long and is such a passionate fan of the game? Like we discussed on the grand final podcast, you've been in the last 49 grand finals and it pained you to miss this year. Like, does it frustrate you?
It saddens me because, I can honestly say, and I know I come across sounding like in my day, but it's true. When I started and for a long time, every single person that was covering football was a massive footy fan who'd grown up going to the footy, loved it. The highlight of the week was being at the game, covering the game. And that's still a highlight for me. But these days, and for a fair while now actually, so many journos that cover the game aren't even interested in going and covering a game. It's sort of like they see going to a game and writing a match report or something as this sort of menial task, and that they're not particularly interested in it. And there seems to be a view that because these games are on TV and everyone watches them live, they don't then need to read an account of what happened in the game because they've already seen it.
Yeah.
And I have always differed on this because I myself used to, if my team had a good win, I used to love reading a well-written match report about how they won that game. And I've always taken a lot of pride in writing match reports. And
writing since you were 5, hey?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that those ones might have been better. But
not probably, definitely.
you need a reasonable knowledge of the game and what makes teams tick and whatever to be able to write an informed, well, not even a match report, but just an analysis of how the game was won or whatever. I think that's a real skill, and to me, that's always been a huge part of my when I judge the quality of football journalists, for me, a huge part is how well they understand the game. I don't think the majority view it like that now. I think the majority view it 80%, 90% based on their ability to break news stories. Now, that's really important, don't get me wrong, and it's not something that was a huge strength of mine, and other people have had a great strength at that, and good on them. But my point about that is anyone can – it's an art in itself, but you don't need to know much about football to break a big news story. Like, for example, that merger story. I could have been not interested in football. I could have been covering courts or something. Had that person given me that information, I would have had enough sense to realise it was important. I could have written the same story whether or not I knew anything about the game. You know what I mean? So, and I think what's happened as a result of that, geez, I'm a long-winded explanation here, but I think
it's good though.
I think what's happened is that the journos, those that didn't play AFL footy, have been consigned more and more to that news-chasing role, and the former players who get into the media, of whom there are a lot more, they are the analysts and the people that tell you about the game.
Do you think that's a good thing, having the former players as the analysts? Because they're not trained, I guess.
I don't. I mean, no, sorry. It can be a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing having that rigid a definition. And it, from a selfish point of view, it costs people like me because it means that, say, and I've done TV. I did Optus Vision before Fox Footy was ever around, but these days someone like Fox Footy would look at me and go, well, if you're a non-player, you've got to be a newsbreaker. Well, he's not a newsbreaker. He's more a commentator analyst. So they would be worried that the people watching at home would look at someone like me, giving my 2 bob's worth on a game and go, well, you haven't played at the highest level. What do you know? I think that's a very outdated view. I think the
100%.
I think the public.
They're calling for good commentators. I feel like a lot of people have been a bit disappointed in the commentators, a lot of them being former players. Don't want to name names, but you know what it's like. And I agree. It's really disappointing that the industry, they can't just look at the quality of the work. They look at how many games of AFL football. And just because you've played the game at the highest level doesn't make you automatically qualified to comment on the game and stuff. Because,
well, it doesn't mean you understand it that
exactly.
well.
It doesn't mean you're a good speaker either.
It just means you can follow X's and O's.
Well, there's 2 important parts. You have to be able to articulate your knowledge, and not all of them do that well. And you have to have the knowledge. And believe it or not, some of the greatest players in the history of the game, well, here's an example. I'm pretty sure he won't hear it. Gary Ablett Sr.
You worked with him, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I did, in a very short-lived, ill-fated
we'll get
Sunday
to that.
age column. But, I mean, he's the best footballer I've ever seen. But if you said to him, how are you such a great player, he wouldn't be able to tell you. And his knowledge of the game was terrible. One of my favourite Gary Ablett stories concerns the first time. So I was his ghost, and he came in to write his first column, and he had this paranoia about talking about himself or talking about Geelong or talking about any of his teammates. And in the end, after about half an hour of donuts. I said, well, Gary, we've got to write about something. I said, what? You guys played Brisbane up at the Gabba at the weekend, and Brisbane had just moved to the Gabba. I said, tell us a bit about that, about what the new look Gabba's like. And he said, oh, yeah, it's pretty good. The facility's good, and plenty of room there in the dressing rooms, and the warm-up area is good and all that stuff. And I said, okay, and we talked a bit about that. And I said, well, what about Brisbane, are a young emerging side? What did you make of them? And he said, yeah. He said, who's that little rugged guy? I said, Chris Scott. He said, yeah, he's not bad. And they've got that young guy, Lepic. He's pretty good. And I said, I threw a few names in. I said, well, what about Nathan Chapman, he was one of the high draft picks the year before? And he goes, nah, geez, sorry, mate. No, who's that? That name doesn't ring a bell at all. And I said, well, actually, Gary, you played the entire 4 quarters on Nathan Chapman and kicked 10 goals on him. And
you would have been on a lot of money as well to go down and do that, Ablett.
Yeah. My other favourite Gazza story is Victoria played a state game over in Adelaide in 87, and Gary Lyon was in his second season. And they're doing lane work, so there's a line of players at each end drilling the ball at each other, and everyone's going, Hawk, Robbie. And Gaz is about to lead for the ball, and he's looked at the guy coming at him with the ball, and he said, behind him, who's this guy? And it was Gary Lyon. So he's state footballer. He didn't know who he was.
Yeah, I just want to take it back a few more years, and I'm curious because I know you started Sun Youth Pictorial, I think, when you were just 17. Just
what's now the Herald Sun.
Just straight out of your HSC VCE now, which is like me in a couple of months, and you're going into this environment of this footy journalism office space. Is it like walking into a footy club? It's super competitive, or is everyone kind of level playing field?
Well, what happens is I wasn't immediately on sport, so long story. So the company was called the Herald and Weekly Times, and you had in the one office you had the Sun, what's now the Herald Sun, and the Herald, which was an evening newspaper in Melbourne. And my father worked for the Herald, so there was this rule you couldn't be on the same paper as a sibling or a family member or whatever. So they put me on the Sun, which was fine because the Sun was the footy paper, I made it known straight away that's what I wanted to do. But one of the things with a cadetship is you're supposed to get a broad range of experiences. So the first year, I was actually taken on not as a cadet but as what they called a copy boy. And a copy boy, this is real like Jimmy Olsen stuff, so copy, which is the stories that people write, used to be wrapped out on the old typewriter or what they call VDTs, video display terminals. They just started to come in. But people still use typewriters, and they'd do it on these little bits
old school,
of copy paper, and then they'd write one sheet, rip it off, put it there, and they yell out, boy! And the copy boy's job was to collate the bits of copy paper and take it to the sub-editor's desk.
To start?
That was great. That was being involved with the production process.
It's been so exciting for you.
But you also had to pick up Terry Vine's dry cleaning, go and put a bet on at the TAB for Jack Elliott, go and get Pat Bowring's ham and salad sandwiches from over the road. So there's a bit of menial stuff too. But they let you do things as well, and you worked in different areas. So one of the areas I worked in as a copy boy was what they called Editorial 2, which was the back building of the old office, which is, do you know where the Press Club is, the restaurant on the corner, Flinders Street and Exhibition Street? Well, that was the Herald and Weekly Times. The back building there housed a whole lot of publications like Home Beautiful, TV Week, the Weekly Times, a magazine called, I think, Prime or Prime Time for pensioners, Sporting Globe, and the Sunday Press, this is before the Sunday Age or Sunday Herald Sun. Scotty Palmer, who's sort of a sports journalistic legend, he was sports editor of the Sunday Press, and I made it known, how keen I was to write footy and stuff. So Scotty would throw me stories, and you got given plenty of opportunities, and that was great.
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, and then you do a year as a copy boy or girl, and then you get a cadetship. When you do a cadetship, the idea is you get a taste of everything. So you do some general news reporting, you do courts, you do police rounds, you do politics, the union round, like trades hall, I don't know if they'd ever have that now. And sport on the Sun, there was a spot for a cadet in sport. But I sort of kept banging the drum so hard that finally when I got into sport, and funnily enough, there was a bit of a staff shortage on sport at that stage. So I went in at the end of 84 into sport to do ostensibly district cricket and VFA football, right?
Which is like what VFL would be now, the VFA,
Correct.
the second tier.
Yeah, correct. But right from the start, because they didn't have enough people, I was also covering VFL games, AFL games, Shield cricket. I did some international cricket. And one of the great thrills, I got to ghost Lou Richards, who was
an absolute legend.
Well, Lou, it's hard to convey to people of your age how big Lou Richards was.
Bigger than Eddie Maguire.
Far bigger than Eddie Maguire. Like Lou, and Lou would do these dares. He'd say, "Yeah, if Collingwood beats Geelong, I'll row. If Geelong beats Collingwood, he did this. I will row across the Barwon River in a bathtub." So Geelong beat Collingwood, and on the Tuesday morning, 10,000 people turned out to watch Lou get in a bathtub and row across the Barwon River with Billy Goggin, the Geelong coach, acting as cock. He did things like he cut Ted Whitten's front lawn with nail clippers. There was one that's on YouTube, actually, in Carlton. He went up to Lygon Street and had to eat a huge bowl of pasta after Carlton beat Collingwood, and the Carlton players turned up and they tipped it all over him. And these dares, it was sort of like the lifeblood of Melbourne. Lou was such a big figure.
Sounds like such a character.
And I got to, by this stage I was 20, and I got to go out in all the stories with him, help him write his stuff. Lou, funnily enough, my dad, back in the 50s, Dad had been a chief or sort of deputy sports editor of The Sun, and Dad sort of invented Lou's Kiss of Death column. So Lou had a soft spot for my dad, so he treated me really well. And he always go, you're only a kid, made you what you are, kid, But he was always so generous about introducing it. I'll never forget the day, for example, we went out to Footscray and we were doing an interview with some Footscray player, and Ted Whitten was there. Ted used to just stroll around the club like he owned the joint. Didn't work there or anything. Ted worked for Adidas, but so we're walking along the corridor and Ted Whitten comes the other way, so it's classic. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah.
So, Ted comes the other way. Lou, you fucking little prick. Goes, Ted, you old bastard, here's a kid. Mate, say good day to young Rohan. And Ted Whitten had this famous handshake where he would grab your hand and literally sort of pull you off your feet. It was sort of like a show of power. I didn't see it coming, so I put my hand out, Ted's grabbed my hand and I've staggered towards him, and Lou's pissed himself, But I remember standing there thinking, I'm standing here between Lou Richards and Ted Whitten.
You pinched yourself.
I did. And it was, experiences like that, I will always treasure things like that.
Yeah, like when you're a 6-year-old kid or whatever on the terraces of Windy Hill, just watching the games as just a spectator, an aspiring journalist maybe in the future, and then like just a bit more than 10 years later, going into that scenario would have been the dream, mate.
And you know what? I don't want to sort of over-romanticise it, but one of the things that I love the fact that every grand final I'm ever at, so I didn't go this year, I couldn't, but like 2019, same feeling. It's a massive day, no matter who's
so
playing. I get nervous and I sit there in a good spot, and I recognise how privileged I am to be able to not only be there but to give people my version of what happened. It's never lost on me, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. And I've worked hard for it, but you've got to have a bit of luck as well. And I'm just so grateful for those experiences I've had along the way.
Oh, mate, that just sounds amazing. I think anybody that's been to a grand final, you're so lucky. Whether it's your team playing or not, it is just one of the most special days on the calendar.
And, I did just yesterday, I did a spot. There's a show called The Party Show on Triple R that a guy called Headley Gritter hosts. It's sort of like a cult thing. And Headley rang me to get my take on sport for the year, and then he asked me, said, we didn't have enough sport this year, so can I have your top 5 moments in sport for the decade from 2011 to 20?
It's tough.
Well, I thought about it. I thought, people, you should have this and you should have this. And in the end, I thought, no, I'm going to have what were my top 5 moments.
And what were they?
Well, I had 3 of them were footy. I had... I'm trying to remember the order. I thought it was fairly magnanimous of me. One of them was Ben Stokes taking England to victory at Headingley last year, which is as close as I've come to crying at a sporting event for a long, or about a sporting event.
That hurt it. That hurt.
My number one event, still the most incredible thing I've witnessed in sport live, was Sergio Aguero winning the title of Manchester City.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the other 3 were footy moments. They were 2018 grand final, which was absolutely epic. 2016.
That was a great game. I was there.
Story. And what I consider, and, I've seen my team win 4 grand finals, but the best grand final I think I've seen in terms of the spectacle and the drama and everything was 2012 when Sydney beat Hawthorn by 10 points, goal by Nick Malcheski in the last 40 seconds. That game, only grand final with 3 comebacks, not just one comeback, there were 3. Incredible individual feats, courage, Goods playing on one
you'll
leg.
never forget that Nick Malcheski goal to seal it.
It felt like it hung in the air for about 30 seconds. Yeah. And I was in the press box. I was sitting next to Martin Blake, really good friend of mine, who was leaving the Age. His last assignment for the Age was covering that grand final. Martin's nephew is Jude Bolton, who was playing for Sydney, and he's pretty understated. Gazelle, his nickname is. He's pretty understated Gazelle. And he was trying to keep it together, but I could see he's really panicking. And Malcheski's snap goes up, and I'm sitting next to him, and I'm punching him on the arm, and then harder and harder and harder. And in the end, I just went, yes!
Was that usual in the press box, or did you have to sort of keep it together?
I've been told off a number of times over the years. I've had some shockers.
I was going to ask, I've always been curious about what goes on in the press box because
it's pretty sedate now.
Yeah, but. Is there a particular moment watching footy? Is that the moment that sticks out to you in the press box, watching that Malcheski goal fly in around his body, or is there another moment from any other decade?
Probably an Essendon moment would be up there.
Well, that one, yeah, couple. There's another funny one, the 93 preliminary final. So Adelaide's 7 goals up on Essendon at half-time. Essendon comes back. So I'm on the Sunday Age. Lee Matthews was writing a column for the Sunday Age. He's sitting next to me in the press box. Essendon's coming back, getting closer and closer, and there's this passage of play which produced the single loudest roar I've ever heard at the MCG, and it starts in the back pocket with Dustin Fletcher, and the ball comes out to Ricky Ollerenshaw in the middle. He runs through the middle of the ground, spears this pass to David Calthorpe, who marks it, handballs to Mark McCurry. McCurry runs in, nails the goal. If you watch that on YouTube, anyone, the speakers just rattle. But on the day, it's the loudest roar I've ever heard at the ground. Anyway, at that moment, I've leapt up out of my seat, like with my arms like this, outstretched, and Lee had just got himself a cup of coffee, unfortunately my right elbow knocked his coffee.
No.
A scalding hot coffee is gone. And he was in a suit and a white shirt because he had to fly up to Brisbane, funnily enough, even though he was still coaching Collingwood. It's gone all over. It would have killed. It was bloody hot. But he was Lee Matthews, so he couldn't, he barely flinched. He just sort of went like that. And then I thought, I'm dead. He's going to kill me. And he turns around to me and he goes, I can't do the voice properly, but he's got a funny sort of high-pitched voice. He goes, geez, Rowan, I knew you barracked for Essendon, but I didn't know you were that passionate about it. So every time I see him, we have a good laugh about that. And there's stuff like that. 99, the preliminary final, the Essendon disaster. I was writing my story after the game, devastated, and then my bloody laptop computer packed up.
Oh, no.
They were pretty early, rudimentary laptops. And I just picked it up. And it was a little thing. It was NEC they were made by. And I've picked it up in one hand and just gone, thrown it across the press box, hit the side wall and just shattered. And I just picked up the phone. Fortunately, we still had the copy takers at the time. So there were like typists who you could dictate your story to, and I just did it off the top of my head.
Was it tough reporting?
The other one, I'm told that I also disgraced myself in 2001, the famous Essendon comeback against North Melbourne. So Essendon came back from 69 points down 10 minutes into the second quarter. Incredible game. Finally sealed the win. I think it was Blake Carousella ran into an open goal, put him 2 goals up, siren's about to go. I've apparently... don't remember it, but I apparently leapt out of my chair and started doing this hula dance. But that was one of the great days of my life, because that was incredible. And then I wrote the match report or whatever I was writing that day, and I went straight from there to the Corner Hotel where I saw my favourite Australian band play one of the best gigs of all time.
Who was that?
The Mark of Cain, who are a bit of a cult band from Adelaide that I've always loved. So
yeah, I haven't been around for any of those moments you mentioned, but I'm sure Tech Man Tony out in the sound shack back there, he's going through a roller coaster of emotion.
Producer Tony.
He's pumping his fists out there.
Yeah, it's pretty Essendon-centric. But look,
I feel a bit outnumbered.
I am genuinely a lover of footy, and I can get as excited. One of the good things about doing it professionally is you can get caught up in other teams, and I've said for long, there's been long periods of my career where I've had better, probably particularly now to be honest, much better relationships with people at other clubs than the club I follow. And you feel really happy for their victories, and you feel sorrow for their failures and stuff. But that's been another great thing about it. The amount of ordinary people I've met in footy, hardly any. Most people in clubs I've dealt with have been great, and I felt like there was decent mutual respect there. They could see that I was a fair dinkum footy head and that I genuinely loved the game, and also I'd hope they could see that I wasn't out to beat up a story, that I had a genuine interest in writing about the game, So I've prided myself a bit on my relationships with coaches and people like that.
Did you ever find it hard to report on your own team, particularly like in the big finals, like prelim finals and grand finals, and they lost? Like that must have been so tough because you're going through a wave of emotions.
Yeah.
But then you're just expected to, like you said, like you have such a passion for putting these match reports together, but it's pretty tough when your own team's just lost, not to have a pessimistic outlook. It takes such a professional approach from your respect.
Quite honestly, no. And, I know, look, people always think, oh, yeah, he's biased and whatever. They're always going to say that. But
it doesn't come out that way.
Well, I've honestly never found it a problem because I've always been so caught up in wanting to write the best thing I could that you've just got to park any disappointment and be professional. And it's just and also that if your team loses, they deserve to lose. I've never been a person that's gone on about, the umpire cost us. I really haven't. I honestly haven't.
Yeah, you don't look like a Collingwood supporter.
So, I mentioned the 99 preliminary final. The other one that sticks in my head for that is the 96 preliminary final against Sydney, where Tony Lockett kicked the
point.
Yeah. Well, I was there for the game. And so what happened that night, it was right on deadline because it was a night game. I had the whole match report virtually written and just with room for a top. And, you know, with how many minutes? 4 minutes left to play, Essendon was 2 goals up. Looked like they were going to win.
I can hear Tony sobbing from out here.
It was hard to cop. And,
Keep it quiet out back, Tony.
I can tell you how that so I wrote the whole thing and filed it, just left room to dictate literally one paragraph. And I had the sports editor said, you know, as soon as the siren goes, ring me, I'll take it down, just dictate it to me. So plug and marks, the siren goes, we're waiting for him to take the kick. I was looking at it from where the press box was behind the goals. I was convinced he was going to kick it or at least make the distance, which is all he had to do. And so I've got the phone up. I've rung through to the sports editor and I said, he's going, what's happening? You know, and I said, he had the TV, but there was a little bit delayed. He said, he's about to kick. Hang on. Put my hand over the phone. He kicks the point. Place goes mad. I go, all right, hang on 2 secs. Put my hand over the phone and I just went, fuck. Sydney last night moved into the 1996. So, that was the one moment of angst I allowed myself and then I dictated a story. So, honestly, I've reported on 3 losing Essendon grand finals. You know, you have to do it.
Speaking of grand finals, what about that honour of being able to vote on Norm Smith medals? Like, that's pretty huge to be allowed that. Oh.
That is a buzz. Well, I've done that twice. So I did 1995 when Greg Williams won it. And I found that one pretty easy, actually. Carlton smashed Geelong and Diesel had 31 disposals and kicked 5 goals from a half-forward flank. He was just outstanding. So gave him the 3. I think I might have given Peter Dean the 2 and Anthony Koutafidis the 1. But everyone voted for Diesel, so that was pretty clear-cut. What was interesting is the second time I did it, 2006. So when I did it in 95, I didn't have to sign anything. I don't think anyone published the individual sets of votes. No one knew who the judges were. You know, it was just an honour, but it wasn't like publicly advertised. By the time I did it in 06, there was a big announcement during the week. You know, the Norm Smith judges will be. I had to sign a agreement saying I won't bet on the Norm Smith. I won't tell anyone my votes. I'll hand them straight over. It was tough in 06 because it was a West Coast Sydney point the difference, and there were a whole heap of good players. And in the end, I gave 3 to Andrew Embley, who won it, and I think all the others went 3 for him as well. But that was a lot tougher. But I must admit, I got a real buzz out of voting on the Norm Smith medal.
So you've covered a lot of games. I'd love to know, so who are your favourite players that you've watched? It can be from any team, it can be any number. You've covered footy for so long, you must have some favourite players to watch and ones that you just really enjoyed.
3 come immediately to mind. Gary Ablett Sr. Why I reckon he's the greatest player of all time, it depends how you frame it. In terms of consistency, no. I'd have Carey ahead of him. I'd have Lee Matthews probably ahead of him. But Gary Ablett Sr. did things that no other player I've ever seen has physically been able to do. And by that I mean combination of strength and brilliance. So, how hard it is to snap a goal over your shoulder and get any distance on it, you know. He could snap over his shoulder from outside 50 metres and comfortably make the distance. The leap he had, you know, he could, without much of a jump, he could just catapult himself into the air. We've all seen a million examples of that. He had a brute strength, quite a deceptively strong body. You know, he didn't have muscles protruding everywhere, but he had a really very strong below the hips. You look at the 89 grand final, ask Dipper. He just made an absolute mess of Dipper, who his lung collapsed so badly he nearly died, But
14-7 in a losing team as well against Essendon, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah.
I covered that game too. Well, Paul Salmon kicked 10 in that game and no one even talks about it. That was an incredible game. He kicked 14. He kicked 3 bags of 14 goals. He kicked two 14s against Richmond and one against Essendon in a losing side.
I can't even get 14 kicks on a Saturday. And he can get 14 goals.
I don't think I had 14 touches my 3 seasons playing, honestly.
Well, that, funnily enough, that 14, I mentioned that column I wrote with him in 93. That column was written on the Friday and the Saturday was that Geelong Essendon game. So the Sunday Age was going huge on the fact that it was his first column. So he's kicked 14. I knew it was coming straight away. I get a call from the office. We've got to get something from Ablett on the 14 goals. And yeah, fair enough. So, I knew it was going to be hard work. So go to the Geelong rooms. Malcolm Blight calls it the most amazing individual performance he's ever seen. Good quote. So the office rings me. Oh, hang on. I think I just got a mobile, actually, and the office rings me. Have you got him yet? Have you got him? No, he's still in the room. He's still in the showers. He was famously slow to get changed and stuff. So I'm standing around there for like 45 minutes waiting for him to get out of the freaking showers. And I've got all this stuff I've got to write. I'm starting to panic. And it finally comes out. There's hardly anyone left. He drags himself out of the shower and goes, "Oh, g'day, Rohan. What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, they want me to talk to you, Gary." "Oh, why?" And I said, "Mate, you just kicked 14 goals." I said, "Your coach has just called it the greatest individual performance he's ever seen." He goes, "Oh, gee, that was nice of him, wasn't it?" And I go, "So what do you reckon, Gary? How do you feel about it?" And he goes, "Oh, look, mate, just say I'm disappointed we lost the game. See ya." And just walks away. Somehow I had to turn that into a story. So look, he was just a freak.
Who are your other ones?
One is Tim Watson, who, I grew up with those baby bombers, and Tim was one of them, along with Merv Neagle and Nobby Clark and Glenn Hawker, Paul Vanderhaar, and I was around their age, I was a couple of years younger. But they were all teenagers, and I was sort of, and it was a long time coming, they came together as a group in about 77, lost a succession of elimination finals, which I suffered, got smashed in a grand final in 83 and then finally won in 84 in the most incredible circumstances, kicked 5 goals to 3-quarter time and then 9-6 in the last quarter. And Tim was a wonderful player. I must admit, if you hear this, Job, I'm sorry, but I've said this to you before.
He'll be listening for sure.
Well, people have that, for a long time there was that, is Job better than Tim? Who's the best Watson? And people would start to mount an argument saying, well, Job's now won, 3 best and fairest, blah, blah, blah. And I would just sit back and go, look, I love Job. Trust me, I think Tim is one of the most underrated champions the game has seen. He had explosive pace. He had incredible power. Was really good overhead. Anytime he went forward, he could kick goals. Ball magnet, always won a swag of possessions. Smart, beautiful user of the footy. He just had it all, and I loved watching him. I saw his first game. All this stuff comes back to me when I start reminiscing. So Tim played his first game at 15 and 10 months. I was there. I was a 12-year-old. It was 1977. They played Richmond out at Waverley. And he looked like a 18-year-old, like he was strong. He's 15. And the game was a draw too, funnily enough. But, I was always a big fan. I ended up getting a duffel coat with Tim 32 Watson on it. And then I got to know him, from the time I was 20. I was dealing with him and found him always really nice.
Yeah, I love him on SEN.
Yeah. No, he's good value to him. He's got a really good, dry sense of humour. His politics are pretty dodgy, but we won't go there. So always loved him as a player. The other one, is just such a great story, but I loved watching him. Not a player that people will immediately guess, but Leon Baker, who only played, I think, 80-odd games for Essendon, 88 games over 5 seasons. Didn't come to Essendon until 28, but he was a football nomad. He was actually a Victorian who had played football in Queensland, in country WA, went from country WA, Bunbury, to play with Swan Districts, played in the 82-83 premierships with Swan Districts. Essendon got him across and he played in 4 straight premierships. But
it's a great story.
One of the great, not tragedies, I always believe strongly Leon Baker should have won the 84 Norm Smith medal. He kicked 4 goals. He kicked 2. He kicked one of the most famous moments of grand final history, the blind turn around David O'Halloran and the goal to put Essendon in front. Who was he like? He was just an incredibly neat, efficient user of the footy, always won plenty of the ball, but never, ever, ever wasted a possession. Incredibly smart, beautiful kick, either foot. And again, like Tim, could go forward and do heaps of damage. So he kicked 4 goals in the 84 grand final. The week before against Collingwood, and they smashed Collingwood, admittedly, but he kicked 6 goals playing out of the middle and half forward. Unfortunately, because he didn't come to Victoria till he was 28, he was starting to struggle with stress fractures and things by the time he was 32. So he only played, 80-odd games. But Tim Watson, funnily enough, will tell you, people say, who's the best player you play with at Essendon? And he will say Leon Baker. Just a brilliant footballer. And look, there's been a whole lot of others who have been spectacular. I've loved watching Buddy Franklin, of the newer breed. I've loved watching Dusty Martin. Dusty. I love watching Dusty, because, again, it's that he has some Ablett-like qualities, the combination of strength with brilliance,
Also off-field as well, he's a bit more quiet like Ablett.
Yeah. And same with Buddy too, I mean, Buddy's had a couple of things, but they're both Buddy and Dusty are, they're not wild or anything, and I mean, Buddy's just been amazing, hasn't he? But then, who earlier than that, as a kid, people like Kevin Bartlett, Royce Hart, Malcolm Blight, the guys that have kicked 100 goals. What an amazing – I think probably my favourite era of football was the early 90s, where the game had become professional and we had the AFL banner, but it was still, that defensiveness hadn't crept into the game so much that sides are incapable of scoring. And when you wonder about that, you look back on the records. 1983, you had 3 guys kick 100 goals. You had Dunstall, Ablett and Modra all kicked over 100. 1992, I think Dunstall kicked 144. He got pretty close to Bob Pratt and Peter Hudson's 150 record. Big score. And it's not just about big scores either. It's about how quickly the ball moved.
Mate, what does the Coleman medalist get now? What did Tom Hawkins kick for the year? Just over 40 goals?
Yeah. Short and 7 bits, but I think they kicked 60-ish.
The average for the last 10 years has been 60-odd. Buddy kicked 100 in 2008.
Bev 99.
Yeah.
He's the only player who was the last one to kick 100 before
Fraser Gehrig?
Did Lloyd kick 100?
Lloyd did, but Gehrig did too in 04.
Yeah.
So that's right. So in the last 17 seasons, only one guy's topped 100. And it'll never happen again unless we make incredibly radical changes.
I love this transition. I was about to ask you about that. What do you think of the current game and the current state in particular? The AFL seems to change the rules every season. There always seems to be a chorus of people saying that the game, it's too slow and the rolling maul and all that. And it's interesting from my perspective, as this is pretty much the only game that I've known for the last 10 or so years, which is really when I've sort of developed into my football watching mind. I'd love to know what your thoughts on the current state of the game are and also the recent rule changes that the AFL has brought in.
Yeah, no, it's a bit of territory to cover there. I wonder if I can do it in less than half an hour. Well, one thing, funnily enough, I discovered this year, and you sort of have this assumption that people like what you like about the game, and people in my age bracket do. That's pretty universal.
Such a generational thing.
But a guy, so I write a weekly column for ESPN, and the guy that's in charge of the footy coverage there, a guy called Neil Seawang, posed this to me and as a column idea, and I wrote about it, and it sort of made more sense, which was, he said, why do we assume that everyone's on the same page with us? He said, maybe kids today think the game's fine the way it is because that's what they're used to. And I sort of thought about it, and I thought, well, yeah, but what about we don't get enough of this, we don't get enough of this? And then I started thinking, well, yeah, but when I was a kid, the things that had been phased out of footy were the drop kick and the stab pass. And old-timers would say, well, we don't see them anymore. And I'd think, well, so what? I don't care, you know, like so. And I just started seeing it more from the perspective of, you know, okay, first thing, if we have to be 100% sure that we're, as many people as possible aren't happy with how the game looks. And perhaps the AFL seems to have made that assumption as well, but maybe to what extent is that actually right? You know, maybe you guys are happy with the game as it is. And I sort of get that now. I've thought about it.
I still enjoy footy. I still love watching. I try and watch as many games as I can.
The test, though, and I'm going to ask you guys this as I'm interested in the response. If you took the best game from the last couple of years, right, and put it up against, have you watched much footy from the early 90s?
Yeah, I've watched the 93 grand final, 93 prelim. I've probably watched other games, can't remember specific ones, but I think
the question was going to be, if you had to make a choice, which game is more attractive to you?
So I think one of the key differences is the free-flowing, free-scoring nature of footy in those days, which is probably one of the things that people like you yearn for. But for me, I don't know if people my age share this view, but when it's non-stop scoring, like that North Melbourne Essendon game in 01, was it?
Yep.
It's a bit basketball-y, just like non-stop action. You just need a bit of need to slow down, I guess, to put it simply.
And there's not much defence happening.
Yeah, that's just what I'm used to because and it is entertaining every now and then when you get a free scoring game, but that rarely happens. And I do prefer a consistently kind of not ultra defensive, but maybe like a 90 game as opposed to a 150 game.
It is funny though that you mentioned basketball, because I think one of my gripes with American football, basketball, you have the timeout, it's a lot stop start. So I do get the aspect and the fact that a lot of stoppages, like it is annoying, like the game stops. And I know one of the things that I find the most annoying, and it's only small, but it's like when you get a free kick or something and the player just doesn't give the ball back, it wastes 8 to 10 seconds. I find that so frustrating. So I definitely get from that respect of like, yeah, there is a few more stoppages, but then I also like what you're saying, Harper, and the fact that how much more sophisticated the defensive systems are at the moment. And yes, it's hard to score. And yes, we had some horrible footy this year, but then how much does that actually have to do with the fact that there were shorter quarters?
And also,
and that they're not training. Like, how are you meant to improve your skills and get that match practice if you can't come within 1.5 metres?
And how much does that have to do with the media pushing this narrative of the game's crap onto people, like rightly or wrongly, pushing the narrative of we've got to fix up this game onto younger people or any people really, and then just everyone thinking it's crap.
I think one of the problems with this is when we're not necessarily asking the right questions, right? So you mentioned the scoring, and so often people say, yeah, we need more scoring. It's not. And I don't think they actually mean that. It's not the scoring, it's the ball movement.
Yeah.
And here's a good example, right? the greatest game of footy I've ever watched is the 94 preliminary final between Geelong and North Melbourne. And that's a game in which Gary Ablett takes a one-handed mark in the goal square just as the siren goes, kicks a goal, Geelong win after the siren. That was a game in which Geelong got out to a 5-goal lead early. North reeled that in and then themselves led by nearly 5 goals. Geelong came back and got in front. North came back and got in front. So, but it wasn't that high for the time. It wasn't that high scoring. In the last quarter, in fact, there are only 3 goals kicked, 2 by North. The 1 goal kicked by Geelong is that Ablett goal after the siren to win it. But it is the most thrillingly fast end-to-end footy you've ever seen. In the last minute, if someone's listening to this and you don't know the game I'm talking about, it's on YouTube. I know there is a clip of just like the last 2 minutes. Just watch that clip and you'll see what I mean. It goes up and back, I think at least 4, if not 5 times, literally in the last minute of play. John Barnes takes a saving mark for Geelong in the defensive goal square, drops a sitter of a mark in his attacking goal square. It's both sides have chances to score. So it doesn't have to be tied up with scoring. It's just about being able to move the ball, guys to be able to run and carry the footy.
Yeah.
A bit of space inside the forward lines when the ball's delivered in there. And the figures, the stats show that the amount of goals coming out of a defensive 50 has plummeted. And I wish I could recall the numbers off the top of my head now. I can't, but I've seen them. It is an incredible drop in the percentage of goals scored out of the defensive 50. All the goals now, or a vast percentage of goals now by the better teams are kicked as a result of turnovers forced in the forward 50, not coming out of the defensive 50.
Richmond model kind of thing.
Yeah. And that can be quite attractive too, I think, in a different sort of way. But I'd still say not as attractive as watching the footy sweep from one end of the ground.
I'd even say Richmond, it's more slingshot footy now. They seem to they get all the numbers up and then they just sort of slingshot it out the back and that sort of
They do that a bit as well.
That's how they're starting to score.
They do that a bit as well.
But I couldn't agree more. I think one of the best games that I've seen, especially for a home and away, was the 2009 St Kilda Geelong game, round 14. I think the scores there were like 68-64, the Michael Gardner mark. That wasn't a high-scoring game, but it's the intensity. It's the fact that it was free-flowing and there's just so many more aspects. But I feel like the AFL is just worried about the scoring. I feel like they're focusing a little bit too much on, the Big Bash, how that was a rating success for a couple of years there. It's not doing as well as what it was. And they're worried too much about what teams are scoring. And particularly one of the new rules, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on like the lowering of the interchange cap rotation.
Just on that St Kilda Geelong game, I agree entirely. It was an incredible game and that was a great season of footy. I would argue, however, that the standard has dropped significantly even in the 11 years since.
Do you think 18 teams has had anything to do with that? Or
yeah, potentially. It's hard to quantify.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've then made my position clear. What do we do about it? I'm now convinced that what we are seeing now isn't going to change substantially unless there is quite radical change.
16 players?
Well, yes. I had, look, there are 3, I did write about this again. I feel like I write
this is
about
pretty,
it
because you're a traditionalist as well, so this is a pretty...
It is a big, but see here, I'm glad you said that because the fundamental, I said before, we're not asking the right questions.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems with this, it is probably the biggest problem, is that the people who are most vocal about not liking the look of the game are also the people who are the most vocal about not wanting to change the rules. Yeah. The problem is that unless we change the rules, we are stuck with this.
We've gone too far in.
Well, people used to talk about the natural evolution of the game. This is where the changes come from 09, right? So 09, we had St Kilda doing the forward press. Before that, we had Clarko's cluster. What else do we have? Collingwood had a version of forward press. Then we had Hawthorn's
Hagen's paddock. And
before that.
Yeah.
But after 09, we had Hawthorn controlling the football.
West Coast Web.
That sort of stuff.
Web, yeah.
The whole game, though, now has become so congested and defensive mechanisms so good, you can only break them down to an extent. So little tweaks aren't going to do the trick. We need to create more space. What's the most obvious way of doing that? Removing 2 players. Now,
I don't think that's going to happen, likely to happen very soon, though, because I agree. Like, I would be all for reducing the number of players on the field to 16
or extending the field. That's the other option.
Yeah, but I just don't think that would happen, because if that happens in the junior leagues and stuff as well, the AFL won't want that have to happen, because that's going to lower participation and lower the money. So
yeah, but again, I understand that. I think
I do want it to happen, though.
Then the argument for that is that better product, that you'll get more people watching and you'll get more revenue that way. If you take away 2 players, well, you might just have more teams.
I mean, people my age have seen it, right? The old VFA played for 20-odd years with 16 aside. You would get guys racking up massive possession tallies, but the game was always open. So
AFLW 16 aside.
Yeah, I think I think things have got so dire in terms of the congestion. We have to really seriously consider that. The other one I think has to be considered is, and I sort of cringe myself saying it because I know what people will say, but this thing they're doing, the trial thing at VFL, whatever the new comp's called, of zones at boundary throw-ins as well as bounces or centre throw-ups, it's not going to have enough impact.
Yeah.
It's like 666. I said this. It's not I told you so, but when 666 came in, everyone was saying, it's going to revolutionise the game. And I was going, well...
It's only at goals.
Why? Because it's only at goals. We're averaging 12 goals a side. There's 24. Throw in the 4 for the start of each quarter. There's 28. How long does a centre bounce take? At most, 10 seconds.
Exactly.
280 seconds is how many minutes? 4 minutes, 40 seconds in a game that lasts 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's minimal. And yes, the centre bounce looks great, but as soon as it's cleared, it's as you were.
Yeah.
So now you've got those 4 minutes, 40 seconds plus the throw-ins. Average throw-ins in a game, I think the last couple of years in a full-length game they've been 60-odd. How long does a throw-in take? 5 seconds? 300 seconds. That's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So you now got a total of 10 minutes out of 2 hours in which zones will exist. You can't. I'm doing a small gap between my fingers. It's nothing. It's chicken shit.
Yeah.
So it's got to be something that actually has a pronounced impact on a game for a pronounced period of time. But you know what? And here we are. I'm riding my hobby horse for all it's worth because I've been going on about this for 10 frickin' years and I cannot get anyone at the AFL to listen. I don't know why. I've brought it up with them directly and every time it's sort of like, oh, yeah. But anyway, longer goal squares and 6. Here's what you do, right? I'm not saying it solves everything, but it sure as hell helps. Watch a clip. Okay, follow these instructions, everyone. Number 1, get on YouTube, drag out a clip of any match from the 1980s, and I would say even the early 90s. Have a look at it. Have a look how many players are allowed to congregate around a disputed ball before the umpire blows a whistle and calls the ball up. You will never, ever see more than about 4 players around that loose ball before the umpire blows a whistle, walks straight in there, and don't forget, had to bounce it, so that took up time. They don't have to do that now. They can just throw it straight up. Yep. Blow the whistle, walk in there, throw it straight up, forget the nominating ruckman, obviously. No one cares if that gets scrapped. Doesn't matter. And clear the area. So what happens then is you don't have 8 players from each side coming in while the ball continues to bobble about. Have a look at any stoppage in today's game. This is what happens. If the ball isn't cleared, a 3rd, a 4th player comes in. They're still fighting for it. A 5th and a 6th come in. And then when someone does get clean possession, they can't extract it because there is by now a group of 15 players around. Like, it's not rocket science, is it?
Yeah.
You watch this clip, and I've written this piece and I embedded a YouTube clip of a game which demonstrated perfectly.
Where can people check out the piece, just quickly?
I wrote it on Footyology, I think, a couple of years ago. How would you find it?
Go into the archives, have a look.
Yeah. But the clip in question was a Collingwood-Essendon game from 1985. It was just a routine home and away game at Victoria Park, and the ball squirts free along the ground, and Tony Shaw and Tim Watson come from opposite directions to battle for the ball. They get there at the same time. There's a bit of a scramble for it. Neither one gets it cleanly. The umpire, whoever it is, can't remember, doesn't even wait for a third person to come in. He blows a whistle. He picks it up. He bounces the footy. Whoever is in the ruck or makes the ruck contest wins a tap. The ball is cleared. There are two people there over a disputed ball, and he calls a whistle. So, yeah, you're going to have more ball ups, but you're going to have the ball being cleared more frequently, in the open more frequently. These 16 players who end up congregating in a radius of 15 metres are now more evenly spread across the ground. Now, that's about as good as I can explain it. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Can either of you guys explain to me why, before we try 16-a-side or zones or longer goal squares or 6-6-6, why don't we try these tweaks of umpiring interpretations which don't require any change to the rules of the game and could help clear the congestion? I feel like, seriously, I'm getting mad talking about it. Steve Hawking, if you listen to this, for fuck's sake, mate. He was an angry little bastard. I'm probably pushing my luck here. He belted Lee Matthews.
Get ready for an angry email.
But seriously, like, it's not rocket science. I feel like picking him up by the lapels and saying, just get the freaking umpires to try it for a few weeks.
Yeah. I feel bad for the umpires because the rules are changing that much for them.
It's not their fault.
Oh, it's not. Like,
and they cop so much shit for...
But the AFL, the players don't even know the rules. How the umpires, But
again, sorry, I'm being so animated about it, but every time I think about it, so here we go. You know, we've had 6-6-6. We're going to have freaking zones. We're talking about getting rid of two players on the ground. The interchange, when I talk about piss farting around, that was the latest column I wrote about it. I said, if the AFL's serious about change, stop piss farting around. The rotations. The average when we bought in the cap had risen to 133. The cap was 120. Didn't notice a thing.
Yeah.
Then after a year of that, or was it 2 years, they said, okay, we're going to bring it down to 90. Didn't notice a thing. It made zero difference. So now what do? Now they talk about bringing it from 90 to 70 to 90 to 75. How is another 15 rotations going to make any significant difference?
An outsider looking at that, a person that doesn't know AFL, looking at that rule change in terms of the interchange cap, would just think that's the stupidest thing. Bringing it down from, 120 to 90 to 70. Like,
and you know what? That whole argument, sorry, now I'm going to piss Kevin Bartlett off. He wants interchange reduced to 20 or something. Wrong direction, KB. There's not even any definitive proof that even greater levels of fatigue will open the game up.
I'd love to ask you that. So if you're a coach and just say there's only 40 rotations, what would you do to your players? Like, because you can rotate less. You'd probably have like 10 of them just in the back line waiting there, correct? And then you just do what they're sort of doing this year with the shorter cores, and then you just try and hold, and then in the last quarter, that's when you make your move.
Slows it down.
And I've had AFL coaches say exactly that to me. That's the first thing we will do. We will not be opening up and attacking more. We'll be stacking our defence.
Yeah, like, it's the logical thing that they would do.
There's also the clubs say they have the data which suggests that all it would do by causing more fatigue is cause more injuries. So then you get fewer of the best players on the park. So that whole argument is contentious. What I'm saying, I don't think surely it's not contentious that by calling for a ball up quicker and allowing fewer players to congregate, the ball will be cleared more easily. Like, that's a black and white argument.
And I feel like adding on that, I think I discussed it before, but making the player just give the ball straight back, not holding it up. Like, that's the thing, or the manning of the mark. Like, that frustrates me so much. I waste 5 or 6 seconds, lets the team get back and defend. Like, that wastes so much time.
No,
it's the most frustrating thing.
You're right.
And it's not talked about.
But see, everyone's got their own hobby horses, haven't they? That's yours. I've just said mine. And what happens now is we've talked about it so endlessly for so many years that every time I write it now, and I'm doing it again now. Yeah. In fact, you're culpable because I've given you a brilliant explanation of my pet hobby horse for clearing it up, and you've responded with yours. And that's what happens.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to happen. I wrote this 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or whatever, and I knew as I published it, I said, here, I tweeted it out. I said, here we go. I'm going to have within 10 minutes, I'm going to have 30 notifications and 28 of them will be people suggesting their own. Yeah. And that's what happens. Every response. Okay, Rocco, here's what you do. It's this simple. Yep. You get the ruckman to dress up in a pink tutu. You make him stand on his head for 5 minutes on a Wednesday afternoon. Simple. Solved. And because there's so many different mooted solutions now, the whole thing's become too... And people just throw up their hands and go, oh, God, not again. So to come back to the initial premise here, we have to decide if we really need to change a game. If we decide we really need to change a game and the kids of today and tomorrow aren't happy with it and want it to go back to how it looked, we need to actually institute measures that will make a significant difference so that we can stop having this bloody debate.
Yeah, and... Like, I could talk about this kind of stuff for you for ages, but I do want to touch on some political stuff just before.
I have no idea about politics, so I'll probably stay quiet.
Just on you right there.
Can I just say, before we get into this, anyone listening to this who is one of the people who either on Twitter or Facebook tells me to stick to sport, this is the moment you turn off, okay? But I would also say to anyone who says that, do you only talk about your jobs? No, I don't only talk about my jobs. I'm very interested in music. I'm very interested in pop culture. I'm very interested in politics.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I like talking about them. My politics are slightly to the left, not extreme. I don't think they're extreme. Slightly to the left. There is your warning. If you don't like it, bugger off.
Yeah, I can tell you. I'm probably more extreme left than you, so I'll cop all the flack. I'm happy to do that. But... What I find, it's not more of a statement, not so much of a question, but what I do find interesting is that you speak about on the rule changes, you do kind of want that more traditional style of footy, the style you got in the early 90s, like you mentioned, but in terms of your politics, it's conservative. Well, not conservative, sorry, progressive. And I just find that interesting.
Yep. And... like I said to Mark Fine, my podcast partner the other day on our own Footyology podcast, he pointed out the fact that I liked a lot of hardcore, aggressive music, and then I, in the same breath, was talking about how much I love the program Sea Change. And he said, you're a man of contradictions. In a way I am. But when you said that, the first person I thought of was my dad. My dad, he was a journalist, but... Dad was exactly the same. Politically, he was very progressive. Dad's politics were far more to the left than me. In fact, my mum and dad, and I'm not saying this with any sense of embarrassment because at the time it was a different thing, they were both briefly members of the Communist Party. They were certainly both very active in the ALP, very active in union movements. My mum has had a strong lifelong interest in Latin American politics. My siblings are heavily involved now in the Greens. I'm probably the least political member of the family. But Dad had very progressive left-wing politics, but when it came to sport, he was an absolute blue blood conservative traditionalist. And the best example of that was when World Series cricket happened, the Kerry Packer blow up. Dad refused to watch or let me watch any World Series cricket. We would only watch the establishment test brand of cricket, which was fine. I probably missed out on some decent cricket as a result. But, Dad loved the tradition and the history of sport. but in politics are progressive, and I'm proudly of the same ilk.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was just going to say, sort of like different peoples from different areas, like how they have their views. Because I know, like I grew up in Carlton, and just at primary school, it was just so much more progressive than where I am now in the Mornington Peninsula. Like we had like Copenhagen, like environmental summits. They made us watch didn't make us, but we watched the Inconvenient Truth. And I remember the whole school stopped in 2008 to watch Kevin Rudd's Surrey speech. Whereas I don't think they had that same experience down at the peninsula, which I'd say is probably more towards that conservative side. And it's just so interesting how it's only an hour's drive away, but how different it actually is. Yeah,
no, it's a really good point. I don't know where to go with this. I mean, look, I tend to be a bit of a cynic and a bit of a pessimist, right? But when I stop and think about the political landscape, one thing that really gives me hope for what I believe in is young people. And I see it in you guys. I see it in my own kids. They're progressive. They're not radical, but they have a strong sense of social justice.
100%. I think if you ask any of my mates, I'm sure a lot of their parents were Liberal voters, which is awesome and stuff. But I feel like a lot of my mates, you ask them what their biggest issue is, it's climate change. And a lot of them are sort of voting that way as a result.
Well, I see it, it's a great example. But I see it with even basic things like I don't think kids are racist. I don't think they're homophobic. My generation was, as younger people, and probably to a large extent still is. I think kids are great on things like that. Even little things like, my son, he has to wear glasses. When I was his age and went to school, if you wore glasses, you get teased relentlessly. All right. I once asked him a couple of years ago, I said, has anyone ever mentioned your glasses to you? And he said, what are you talking about? Sort of kids are magnificently accepting of difference now. And you know what? When I say, you know what, I get off getting my hobby horse. People like Andrew Bolt are so dismissive of, progressive, the education system, instilling them with these lefty ideas. Nah, they're not instilling them with lefty ideas. They are instilling them with a basic sense of frickin' decency, and that is the decency to be accepting of difference and accepting of people's quirks, and recognising that we're all part of one big melting pot. And it sounds cliched, but that's really how the world is. And you know what? I can't stop doing it. This is, Andrew Bolt wrote his incredibly bloody narcissistic, I'm leaving Melbourne, I don't like Melbourne anymore. And we're all supposed to care. He bet he got the shock of his life from the entire Melbourne community. Said, piss off, Andrew. But he doesn't. That's what struck me about it, is that after living here for 40-odd years, he doesn't get Melbourne. And you know why he doesn't get it? Because he doesn't understand that sort of racial diversity. He doesn't understand the way that I'm so proud of people. My partner is from Broken Hill, and she reckons I go bang on and on about Melbourne. She goes, why do you crap on about how great Melbourne is? And I said, I'll tell you why. Because I'm in my mid-50s. When I grew up as a kid, Victoria was known as the jewel in the Liberal crown. It was probably the most conservative, traditionally conservative state in Australia, right? We had a Liberal government here, as a state government here, for 27 years in a row until 1982. Since that moment, so over the last less than 40 years, I have seen the city radically change in terms of its racial profile, in terms of its cosmopolitan feel. You used to be, look, I'd like a little less traffic, but, on a Sunday in Melbourne, you could fire a cannon through the city. It was just dead. Melbourne is this vibrant, bustling community, the whole coffee, cafe, laneway culture, the bars, the restaurants, the different ethnic communities that all establish their own little shopping centres and cultural centres, and we're all able to go and visit them, and they're proud of that. And people like Andrew Bolt see that as ghettos or whatever, and, we should all be thrown in together. It doesn't work like that. But no worries. We all learn That was my alarm, if anyone's wondering. We all learn from each other as a result of that. And Melbourne, I love the fact that we are now seen as the progressive capital of Australia because it's the most stark change from
Something
how it
to
was
tip our
as I
hats
was
to.
a kid. And we've grown, and I'm really proud to have lived through that.
Yeah, and like I probably go to one of the most left-wing schools in the state, or probably even in the country. And it's when those climate change rallies happened last year, maybe the year before as well. It was like truly amazing, like the amount of young people like willing to take a stand for what they really believe in. I don't know how strong that taking a stand kind of characteristic was when you were growing up, but 80% of the classes that happen in my school during those climate change rallies just get cancelled because everyone goes. Like,
yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. Look, it was funny because my family was like that, but I grew up in East Malvern, which was a very traditionally conservative area and still is really, where I live in Higgins. It's one of the safer Liberal seats in the country. And we were sort of seen as the, lovably eccentric, quirky family in East Malvern. But at the age of 5, I can remember being taken by my parents to a anti-Vietnam moratorium march. And it was a famous rally in the middle of Melbourne in 1970. 100,000 people turned up. And it was seen as being a very pivotal thing in the changing of people's opinions about the Vietnam War. I was there at 5, I was taken, by my folks and with my brother and sisters to a variety of protest marches over the years about nuclear weapons and, various causes, climate change. More recently, I've been with my kids. That wasn't the norm around me. I did get in enormous trouble once in grade 1 when I still feel guilty about this, on Remembrance Day, people buy a poppy.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War was still going. This is 1971. And I sort of got a bit too active and ran around telling all my classmates not to buy a poppy because the money they paid for the poppy went to buy arms for the Vietnam War. And actually didn't. It probably just went to help some poor veterans who were coming back from the war to get completely damaged psychologically. And I did get in a bit of trouble about that. But, I came from a political family in an environment that wasn't that political. But I love the fact that, kids your age are doing that sort of stuff now. And it gives me genuine hope for the future. And in a way, we need, sadly, my generation to piss off and let the kids have a go because we're clearly not going to accomplish anything because, our government at the moment is too beholden to vested interests of, coal and, the gas lobby and the mining lobby, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's the government and the opposition, the ALP. The ALP politically now is about where the Liberal Party I grew up with was.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. There's been both major parties have moved so far to the right that the Greens are probably what the ALP used to be, And I was going to say this, that, look, I'm quite political. I get really pissed off with a number of people in sport who say either stick to sport or you're an extreme leftist. I'm not extreme leftist. I don't champion any cause that is any more extreme than social equality, equality and fairness. That's all I'm about. Yeah. If that makes me a social justice warrior, so be it. I'm proud to be called one,
Yeah.
But sport is a very conservative field as well.
Yeah, just before we get to our very final segment, I've just got one last question, and it's a bit of a broad question, but I was wondering if you've got a bit of a life philosophy or a principle that kind of guides you, or a quote or anything that kind of guides you in the decisions you make and the actions you take in life in general.
I probably haven't, but two things just sprung into my head. One is something I say to people jokingly, when I'm offering advice or whatever, I want them to do something. I do have a bit of a tendency to micromanage stuff, So if I'm advising someone on how to do something, I'll always say, don't fuck it up. The other one is one I know my dad used to say a lot, and my mum still says, God love her. And I think it's a good look. I tend to be a glass half empty person, or some would say a glass never had anything in it sort of person. But I like the line, don't let the bastards get you down, because people can criticise you and you can have setbacks and stuff. But, and this is a cliche, but how you respond to setbacks says a lot about you, about your resilience, and about your capacity to rebound and not be broken by something. And it's hard to do sometimes. I've had some shocking downs in my life. I really have. I've coped with tragedy. I lost my brother at the age of 36. My father, my father lived to a decent age, but I lost him. I had a marriage breakdown. I had a fairly disastrous relationship subsequent to that. She who must not be named, but I'm sort of proud that I've been able to soldier on in a way. So, don't let the bastards get you down.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. But going to a more light-hearted note, Rohan.
It's the part where I lose.
Last time you came on the show, we had a quiz as the last segment. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So we do that on every episode, but
I'm not that good on everything.
So last time, I think it was naming all the premiers, going back in time.
Just before you do that, do you know what? I feel like that's fine because I've just about exhausted my voice box. We didn't talk about music. I've got three great staples in my life: sport, music, politics.
Mate, we've run out of time. It's right there. I was going
No, it's fine. Look, I'll sum up my musical taste. My family's pretty musical. My brother was a guitarist with Paul Kelly and the Colour Girls,
Amazing
Paul Kelly and the Messengers. Very proud of what he did with that. Sadly, no longer with us. But, yeah, I grew up listening to music. I got into Creedence Clearwater Revival very early. So I've always been a bit of a rock pig. I had a disturbing sort of synthesizer period in the early 80s, but everyone did.
We've all been there.
Everyone did. Funnily, my taste seemed to have got heavier the older I've got. Not necessarily the case now. I have tuned out of a fair bit of new stuff, but I love Rage Against the Machine. I love a lot of those American grungy bands, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden. Who else do I love? I love I'm big on American rock and a bit of cult.
I'd love to know your favourite live show that you've been to, because live music, ever. I know it's a tough question, but live music is such an important part of the experience. It's something that I've missed.
I've seen Rage Against the Machine 3 times. I've seen them twice at the Big Day Out and once at Festival Hall.
Was the first time the best? Or
yeah, in a way, probably, because that's a funny story, actually. Sorry, I knew this had happened. That is a funny story because, I'm a real rock pig. Their self-titled album came out in 92, and I used to do a bit of record reviewing and music stuff for the paper, particularly when I was on the Sunday Age, and the arts editor sort of dropped it on my desk, and I hadn't heard anything about them, and I took it home and I put it on, and I did that skip through play the first 10 seconds of each song, and virtually every song, I thought, oh, yeah, so it's rap. I'm not into rap. Next. And I sort of didn't listen to it. And then, I don't know, probably a year later, Killing of a Name started getting a bit of airplay, and I thought, it's not bad. But it didn't, for some reason, inspire me to play the rest of the album. So Big Day Out comes along, and I'd read a couple of pieces about him in the lead up to it. So by now I was keen to see them. So this Big Day Out 96, 4 years after this album's come out. And anyway, so I got a good spot. They weren't headlining or anything, but they had a reasonably prominent spot in the bill, and got in position early, got a decent spot. So they come out and I'm pretty sure the first track they played was Bomb Track, which is the first track on the album. So it goes, and I'm thinking, yeah. And I'm just going, oh my fucking God. And then just song after song. And it got to the end of their set, and I just went, I remember, I've got to get home and put that out of CD on. And I put it on, and my wife was there, and she didn't come to the gig with me. And she comes out, and I'm just standing there going like this. She goes, what's wrong? I said, I've had this album for 4 years and never played it. What's wrong with me? And I was just hooked on them after that. What is it about that band? They're political, most intelligent lyrics any band's ever written, and angriest. The fusion of funk and metal and rap, it works incredibly well, and no one's ever come within a bull's roar of replicating it. As musos, they are incredibly proficient at what they do, and the rhythm section. I play the bass badly, admittedly, but Timmy Comerford and Brad Wilk, the bass player and the drummer, they are just in sync. They are the one person. And I just love that band so much.
Some of the riffs are just...
It's just anytime I hear them, it's just how can you hear that and not start banging your fist or tapping your foot? Or
if they made a song about footy, they'd be your perfect band.
Well,
they already are this perfect band.
That's
funny you mention that. When I was doing a pay TV show on Optus Vision, you'll have to dig this song up. This guy used to do footy videos. And for the show, I was on Football Feedback, and I would bring in stuff and say, "What about this? Will this work?" And we got quite into it. And I found this song by someone I liked, and I played it to him. I said, "What about this?" And he goes, "Oh yeah." And we were down for it. And then the boss, who I won't name but is still prominent in the media, walked in and he said, "Nah, you're not using that. That'll just piss people off." Because what it was a song by the Rollins band, Henry Rollins. He's like an American punk poet. Was sang in a band called Black Flag, who are a famous American punk band. Put his own band together, the Rollins band. The song, it's off a 1997 album called Come In and Burn. The song is called On My Way to the Cage. Anyone who's hearing this, check it out, have a listen to it. Imagine a footy video of punch-ups and heavy hits and tough sort of stuff on the footy field. It is the perfect accompaniment to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, what a stupid digression that was.
Yeah. Well,
No, I enjoyed that. That was
enjoyable.
I love that. I love the passion.
Maybe you can stick the song on this podcast. Great song.
Yeah.
Probably don't have the rights to it.
Yeah, exactly. But our final segment is well known to all our listeners. It's what they listen for. When we really dig to the core of what they listen for. They listen for the quiz, the Where Do We Begin quiz. So, guys, are you ready to get into it?
100%.
Well, it depends what the subject matter is.
So we like to keep the quiz vaguely related to our guest's career. So I've done a bit of a different one. It's very general knowledge, I'll say that. Done a bit of a different one today. So can you just tell me when's your birthday, just to get us started? What the date?
5th of March.
5th of March, okay. So
Great day.
it is a great date. All the questions are related to the 5th of March. So that's all that's connected to Rohan, really. So it's a pretty general knowledge thing, but all related to the 5th of March.
Hang on, how do you know my birthday was the 5th of March?
I had to do a bit of digging. I had to say, you said it's my birthday today or something like that on Twitter on the 5th of March. So
Well done.
yeah, took a bit of research. But anyway, so we'll start with question one. Your name's your buzzer. So like we said, bit of general knowledge. So question one is...
So, sorry, your name is your buzzer.
name is your buzzer,
Okay.
yeah. So just Rohan or Lockie. Question one. So when the British Empire declared war on the Burmese Empire, a Southeast Asian country now known as Myanmar, on the 5th of March, 1824, the First Burma War began. But can you name a country that modern-day Myanmar borders?
Rowan.
Thailand is absolutely correct. Bangladesh, China, India, Laos, and Thailand.
I was actually thinking Lao.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, that was tough.
too slow.
Gee,
Anyway,
that was
question,
tough.
question 2. Okay, so on the 5th of March 1965, the Rolling Stones' Under the Boardwalk / Walking the Dog was number 1 in Australia. But 1964 is much more interesting if we're talking about the music charts, because that year the Beatles had a single at number 1 for the first 24 weeks of the year, 40 weeks in
Rocky.
total.
Yellow Submarine.
Yeah, Submarine's incorrect.
Rohan, I assume the question is, what was the song?
No.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I'll keep going. Here are the lyrics to the single.
Well, you're out because you got it wrong.
You are out.
So-
here are the lyrics to the single that was number 1.
But what's the question?
Yeah, so I'm going to read the lyrics to the single that was number 1
Yep.
on the 5th of March 1964.
Okay. Yep.
And you just buzz in whenever you say it. It's all you, Ron. So you got a free hit at this. So it's a Beatles song, obviously. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, she was just 17. You know what I mean. And the way she looked was way beyond compare.
Rowan,
Go for it.
when I saw her standing there.
Yeah, I'll give it to you. I saw her standing there.
saw her standing
Absolutely correct.
Jeez,
So,
mate. You wouldn't have paid that for me.
Yellow Submarine, I reckon, was about 68 or 9.
yeah, that was the movie, wasn't it? It was part
I
of
went
that
earlier. I
movie.
thought that one would have broken a few records.
Yeah. Anyway, question 3. Rowan's 2-0 up. So, on the 5th of March, 1983, Bob Hawke defeated Malcolm Fraser in a federal election to become Australia's 23rd Prime Minister. After Hawke, how many Prime Ministers have there been?
Rowan.
Rowan.
Okay, I need clarification here. What if the same person's been Prime Minister twice
Oh, we'll just count that person as one person.
as one
Yep.
person?
Yep.
So how many Prime Ministers since Hawke?
Yep. After Hawke. Yep.
I wish
I'm
you were
gonna
going to say
do-
what his hometown was because I know that beautiful border town.
I'm going to do this progressively, all right? So Paul Keating, John Howard, Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard, Rudd again, but that's the one person, Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison, 7.
Rohan Connolly, 8.
Fat chance. Fat chance. Far too many skeletons in my closet.
It's absolutely correct. Rowan's 3-0 up.
Oh, mate, stop asking him questions starting in the 80s.
Actually, I do remember that vividly, March the 5th, 83. It was a huge night in the Connolly household.
Yeah. Anyway, question 4. So this might be more suited to you, Lockie. This one's closest to the pin. So on the 5th of March, 2019, Forbes announced that Kylie Jenner was the world's youngest ever self-made billionaire. So closest to the pin, how old was she at the time?
Rowan,
Rowan.
23.
23 is incorrect, but it's closest to the pin, so I'll give Lockie a shot.
24.
He's gone over. It's 21.
Oh, no. Wait, did you say Kyle? You said Kendall, didn't you?
Kylie.
Oh, I thought you said Kendall.
Well,
Jeez.
what can I say? Rowan's 4-0 up. She was born on the August
Is
10.
Kendall younger or older?
Yeah, Kendall's older. That's
I don't know.
I wouldn't know.
Countless bloody hacks.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I thought Kylie was younger, but I thought you said Kendall. Gee whiz, I've
Unlucky.
stitched myself up here.
Anyway, question 5. But so Rowan's 4-0 up, yeah?
Yeah.
But Lockie, you still got a chance because
Got this.
question 5 is a who am I question. And I'm going to go down from 5 points all the way down to 1 point with a series of clues.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all leading to a person.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's the
right.
who am I. So once you buzz in,
Yeah.
you can't buzz in again until the other person gets it wrong. So we're going to start with a 5-point clue. Lockie, you have to get it here to win it outright.
Yeah.
I was born on the 5th of March, 1996 and raised in Romsey, Victoria. Should I move it on?
Yeah.
For 4 points. For the draw.
Sorry, they were born on the 5th of March.
1996,
96.
yep.
Okay.
In Romsey.
Yeah, in Romsey. Oh, raised in Romsey, Victoria. Not quite sure where exactly they were born, but raised in Romsey. 4 points. I was drafted at pick 14 in the 2014 national draft and was named in the 22 under 22 team in 2015, 16 and 17.
Pick 14 in the 2014 draft.
Do you want to have a crack, Lockie? We'll take it to a tiebreaker if we get it here.
I've got an idea, but I.
Do you want to have a shot to win it 8-0? Might break some records.
I'm just thinking, should I play it safe and just hear one more clue? Do you feel like you know it?
I'm trying to think. So 2040.
I'm going to have a stab.
Go for it.
Rowan. Jake Lever.
Jake Lever is correct.
Not bad.
You know how I worked that out? I got lucky. No, I'm lucky because I'm not a big.
Sam Durden picked 13 in that draft.
I couldn't tell you.
I'm not a big student of the draft anymore, but I know there's a one time in my life I've been grateful for Brian Taylor because the amount he craps on about knowing Jake Lever and that Jake Lever grew up in Romsey.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Anyway, it's led to an 8-0 win and a historic win for Rohan Connolly.
That's better than my 6-0 win the other week.
Oh, yeah, it is better. And I think last time we had an 8-0 win, Jackson was the other host of the podcast against Scott McDonald. But anyway, congratulations.
They were good questions, actually.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you very much. 8-0 win. So
thanks so much for coming on, Rowan. It was an absolute pleasure.
It was.
No, that was good fun. I don't know how many hours we ended up doing, but no, I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Wow, how good was that?
Rohan Connolly, we got about 2 hours out of him. Filled with 2 hours of just great content, really. Great guy to talk to.
Yep, just love talking about sport, footy, politics. It was so much fun. So thanks so much for doing that, Rowan. We really appreciate it. Now, Harps, do you reckon it's time to plug the socials?
Yeah, I reckon it is. So you can check us out on Facebook at Where Do We Begin or facebook.com/WDWB pod. And of course, Instagram and Twitter at WDWB pod. That is WDWB pod. And Lockie, we're going to continue our music thing that we've started last week. We're going to be doing for this foreseeable future. So do you want to tell us a bit about the song that we're featuring today?
Yeah, so it's from the band Dreamworm and it's from their upcoming album, The Journey.
Yeah. So, it's the first single off the upcoming album. And they've actually got a pretty cool music video. It's got like some dances and some fire performers and stuff like that. So they're pretty good rocky Melbourne band. I reckon it might be kind of similar to Rohan Connolly's style of music. You can actually check out the guys at www.thedreamwormiscoming.com and all the links to all their socials, their YouTube videos, all their music. It's up there at www.thedreamwormiscoming.com. And the song is called Transform. Just before we play that, we just want to thank you guys a lot for listening. Lockie, anything else to say?
No, just thanks everybody for listening and make sure you recommend us to your friend, your grandma at Christmas, the works.
Yeah, exactly. Recommend us to all your mates. And before we play the song, here's Tom from the band chatting about the song. And after that, it's Transform by Dreamworm.
Hey, it's Tom here from Dreamworm. Dreamworm started as a way for me to get out some of the music that I'd written over the years. We've just run a crowdfund campaign to provide the funds to record the second Dreamworm album, which is called The Journey. And we hit the funding target, so the album's going to be made. I'm incredibly humbled and thankful that people want to hear my music enough that they're willing to chip in to help me make it. And now that live music is starting to happen again, I'm really looking forward to getting the band back together and playing some Dreamworm shows in 2021. Watch now as become something that you never could imagine. Shake, change, embrace the strange as we transform. Shape, change, everything rearranged. We are reborn. What you were is dead and gone.
Shame.